Okay, so we were just talking about the Bhagavad Gita and how it recapitulates jihad, and I mentioned the Qadiriya idea of the jihad al nafs, which is sort of taming that dilemma in interpreting the Quran, and how the Salafis call the Sufis the Ahlul Bida, the people of religious innovation, and they use late hadiths, which are very surely fabricated, to say that they're therefore bound for the hellfire, and you should be a Salafi, and then having effectively marginalized the Sufis, and they've already preemptively takfired the there's no like we don't agree with the Shia, but they're still Muslims. It's like no, the Shia are kuffar, the Hawarij are kuffar. We're not Hawarij because we support the king and we go to Starbucks. At least that's the Madhali Salafis. The Kwani Salafis are like guys funding Hamas, right? Qatar. But anyway, that's another. So that's where you get it deeper into this jihad question. But I don't want to get sidetracked. And then they've been like debating with Asharis and all that. So anyway, these people are all the perennial villain. Speaking of perennialism, the perennial villains of my Islam and my jihad of speech. Not to be divisive, this is another paradox in Islam, is like you're supposed to enjoin the good and forbid the bad, but not to have divisive speech or be sectarian. But if so this is everyone's attack fearing each other, saying they're not really Muslims, etc. But anyway, getting down to the meat and potatoes of it, um, the Sufis say, like, first off, how can like a breathing technique?
Tofu and potatoes.
Yeah, like how can breathing, as you say your zikr, which is in the sunnah, um, to say like Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, and if you do it like kind of breathy, like the Sufis do, they go La ilaha illallah, like, and they get like a whole bunch of them in a room. It's badass, they're like, it's like a rock concert, and the Shia take it further, and they actually kind of do like dubstep. And they're like, "Ya Ali," and they're like, "Ah," and then some Sunni guy comments like they're speed running Jahannam. So anyway, they say that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was meditating in a cave for like 10 years before he got his revelations.
That makes perfect sense to me.
So why aren't we meditating?
Well,
that's the Sufi thing. Yeah.
Meditation is.
Do you want to turn that off? Is that?
I'm boiling a ton of chickpeas.
Is it ready?
No, but I can do it later.
You don't have to. No, it's okay. I just wanted to. We'll deal with it.
The pressure cooker. That's a Buddhist household. A lot of chickpeas in the pressure cooker.
So I guess the interesting question.
I can answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
The queen of meditation is shamatha, which is mental peace and clarity. And it's called a queen of meditation because it's the first step. This is the base of the pyramid. If you don't train yourself to be able to do this, you can't ascend to the tougher practices.
So I think of this as kind of like khushu and salah, this like heartfelt piece that. Okay.
And the whole point of this is that you train your focus into one thing. You train your mind to be focused on a single thing for 30 minutes. The Buddha said the easiest thing was to do your breath. So you focus on, there's anapanasati, where you focus on the point where the air comes in through your nose and out through your nose. But you can also do mantra, and then you use the object of the meditation can be your voice, it can be your breath, it can be a word, but it's not about the object. And this is why you can use mantra or call the names of God in Muslim. But the whole point is that you are focused on this one thing for 30 minutes or an hour, 2 hours, as much as your brain can handle. And as you attempt to do this, you will realize your mind does not like it. And it will start pushing thoughts at you. And you cannot reject them because the mind only has an accelerator. It does not have what do you say in English?
A
brake. So when you get a thought, like, oh, I gotta shop for rice, oh, like, or random, I don't know what you think about, work, sex, whatever.
This is something I struggle with in Salah
Everybody
myself.
struggles with this.
Yes.
It's the whole point. Instead of fighting it, you just let it go like a bubble. You're like, thank you very much. And then you continue to focus on whatever you have chosen that you're going to focus. And as you do this every day for years, you eventually start getting good at it.
That's what I was thinking last night. Is I was thinking about how I'm not like that good at this, but maybe if I keep doing it for years, then I'll get good at
It
it.
has to be like, but the thing is, you never stop trying. So if you're doing, I don't know what the Muslim word for mantras, but I know how guys have mantras.
Zikr,
If you're doing sticker,
the remembrance.
if you're doing sticker, and you're thinking about what chores you got to do next week, and you just
Yeah,
allow it, then you're not advancing. The whole point is that you continue to come back, like teaching a
that's
toddler,
the
like
jihad
teaching
al
a dog.
nafs.
You just come back. But
Yeah,
this is what we call it formal meditation when you're doing it on the cushion, because you for 30 minutes every single day of your life you just try to train the monkey, and then eventually starts bleeding into your life. And
right.
then you're at work and you're like, I want to go get chips, and you're like, no, I'm gonna finish this, or and it starts
Yeah, it
as
helps with productivity and discipline.
but as you do this, you start understanding the way your mind works. And then let's say you're on a diet, you want a cookie, and you understand the thought and how it feels. Or your son slaps you and you want to slap him back, and you understand the thought and the emotion where it's coming from. It gives you a lot of scientific knowledge on the way your mind works and how to tweak it. So as you train yourself to be like, no, I'm not going to think about work, I'm going to think about the zikr. Eventually, you're like, no, I'm not going to yell at that guy who just ran the red light. I'm gonna not do it. It gives you a control. Most of the evil in this world is not done. It's done in automatic pilot,
Right, right.
and it gives you to do formal meditation. Gives you that space, and that's how you develop virtue by giving you the command. You get to, if you learn how to decide what you focus on, what you think of, you can teach yourself how to decide what you do. If you have that drink, if you hook up with that girl, it gives you that space.
Yeah. Well, one thing I find it with the Salah, and I've commented on this before on the channel, is that you're taking that 30 minutes of shwamata each day, and maybe you don't get to budget the 30 minutes because that's a hard, maybe that's too much for a mother, for example, right? You don't have a flexible schedule. Um, so we're a very busy professional and whatnot. So you break it into these 6.5 minute epochs over the day, and then when you find yourself as you recite Fatiha and a bit of Quran, slipping into thinking about the future, the day, what are you going to do after, what do you want to eat, all these things, right? I want to make myself a bowl of granola, or I'm going to go eat some dates after this.
Yeah.
But then you remember as you're about to go into the prostration that, oh, I'm like worshiping God here, I need to refocus. So you should at least get it right for like the 10 seconds or whatever, 5 seconds maybe, that you're in the prostration, and you try to empty the cup, empty the mind, bow your head, bow your ego, void your ego for a brief moment, and it's doable at that interval. Then you get up. So now you're doing this yogic thing, right? So instead of the sun salutations where you're kind of bending the leg back and doing this whole pirouette, you're just kind of doing a simple bow, and then you come up. It's a simplified sun salutation type routine. The Zoroastrians had a similar kind of routine physically that's in the Salah. Um, and there were the Essenes practiced something like that as well.
Well, yoga means something else. So what you're talking about is asanas, which are the positions. And
Yeah,
I also do try to get some hatha yoga with the asanas every day, and it does help the meditative state. But it's not like brain surgery. Like actually sitting down, you're also battling your body because your body wants to twitch, it wants to move, it wants to scratch. Um, so I really think seated meditation is really important if you want to gain full control of your brain, because it's physical and psychological pain that you're battling. there's no distraction. You're just like sitting there witnessing how every part of you wants to do things and you're not letting it. It's like training a dog. It's,
I mean, I think with the shorter salah, if you're not doing nafil and extending the time, because you can do like triple the volume. Instead of doing 17 rakas a day, you can do like 50 or 34. Like on this is Juma today, so I do about 30 some today. Um, and that pushes it a little bit more. My bro Muhammad, the Quranist guy, he does his own prayer fiqh where he prays the entire Fajr period where the light's coming up before the sunrise, and the entire Maghrib period where the sun is set but it isn't dark yet. And then he does like extended tahajjud because he doesn't have a family. He just like does
and
his
it's
YouTube and
like single
travels
guy things to do.
and goes out and like helps children not get shot, like when the Syrian revolution was happening, and puts himself in harm's way and leaves it up to God. He's a cool dude. So anyway, he has this time where he's more like a monk, but in this demysticized interpretation. But they're still within the obvious reading of the Quran. You could do that amount. And there are Sufi guys that do that amount of effort as well. So like when I get up for tahajjud, I had a chance I could have gotten up for tahajjud this morning, and I was like, nah, I need to sleep. I want to do a bunch of prayer. I don't want. But when I get up for tahajjud, I do like three rakas, and then maybe it's at like 4:50, and I combine it with fajr afterwards. It's a discount tahajjud. But there are people who do like hardcore tahajjud, right, where they get up and they spend like an hour and a half, like just doing it. And like the Sufis after the Juma, you stick around for half an hour to make zikr together. Whereas the Salafi mosques, they respect your time a little bit more. You got to go out and seek the bounty of Allah, as the Quran says in Surah Juma, because they're more about results, I guess, as all modernist religious movements tend to be. Um, so I guess a big question is, we have Christ being baptized and having the epiphany of the adoption in this like low Christology that is more Quranic. It's not like an adoption in an exclusive sense. It's more like he's initiated into this messianic rank of the other prophets, albeit having already been created as this second Adam. So it's his destiny to do this in an epic way, maybe more epically than Elijah alayhi salam or Dawood alayhi salam. And then you have Buddha sitting under a tree and having his epiphany. And then you have the Prophet Muhammad meditating in a cave and having his epiphany. And these epiphanies have some things in common, and they have different notes, right? And a big one is that in the Surah Clot of, I made you from a clot. This is this first revelation. After this after this exposition, it notes that like there are people in Mecca who are going to go to hell, and you need to like go warn people and stand up for what's true. This is the beginning of the mission, and so it's like there's an aspect of avoiding suffering through a preemptive reformation back into a pure monotheism. This like the onset, the inciting incident of this story, of this epiphatic mission. And for Gautama, for Shakyamuni, it is more like we're already in hell, kind of. I mean, relatively speaking. And the way to get out of it is to detach mentally from the expectation and the idea that your suffering is due to not wanting to be a starving, like broke person that's suffering from disease and so on. Um, would you say that's accurate? And what do you think about them?
Well, the first thing is this is the Four Noble Truths. That's the first thing, the core of Buddhism. Like
But did he
life is
realize that
suffering.
like that day?
Yeah,
He like formalized that in his head that day.
yeah.
That's his suriclot.
The Four Noble Truths are the core.
Uh huh.
Kind of. It's just Buddhism is too complex, but you can start with the Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering. Suffering comes from desire and aversion.
Right.
And then there's the good news, right? Like you can get out of the suffering, and the way to get out of the suffering is the Eightfold Path.
But he didn't like codify what the Eightfold Path was
Yeah, he did.
on that very same day.
Well, he didn't. There's no text. The Buddha taught for 50 years.
But in the tradition, in the narration of what he
I don't
experienced.
know what day. Well, he experienced enlightenment, which means and it wasn't a process of him getting enlightened after meditating for a while. It's a karmic process. In fact, like the bedtime stories that you're just saying, like it was supposed to be all the past lives of the Buddha. It didn't just happen. It happened for many lives. He put in the work, and then many years during his life as the Shakyamuni, and then he got enlightened, which means he figured everything out. And then the way he taught for 50 years to different people in different ways. So the download was there. The day that he talked about the Eightfold Path, I don't know which specific date, but
Sure.
the knowledge was downloaded like in that
Right.
under the body tree.
Do you believe that that was a divine revelation, or do you think that was a mental breakthrough, sort of like Einstein synthesizing relativity in his head?
Both.
Okay, so you do think it was a divine revelation?
Well, this is not strict Buddhism. It's just my belief. And
Sure.
I have the yogic belief that we are all a part of the divine. But also, this is it's hard to explain. In Buddhism, yes, we all have the Buddha nature in us. We are not missing happiness and missing knowledge. We just have too much of the other stuff, like an onion. You know,
Yeah.
the core is the Buddha nature, and then the other layers are what's making us unhappy, which is self-centeredness, our obsession with our own desires, afflictive patterns, learned patterns from our family members and our society. And then when you peel all that, you get to the core, which is the truth. So we all have the truth in us. We all have the possibility of accessing the truth. And this is like you don't have to read it from a text. And the Shakyamuni always said like don't buy it, don't believe me, like try it. And
Right.
this is how you become a Buddhist. You try the suggestions of the Buddha, and you're like, holy shit, and then that's it, you know.
Well, I was thinking that a really effective form of dawa that I have not seen tried is like inviting people to just pray 2 rakas with you and having a little thing of water so you can like voodoo them. And it feels so nice to get the water on you and then to prostrating. It feels very natural. It's this like child pose, basically, right? In the yoga, in the asanas. And just try it. You might like it, and then we can get into the creed and everything, right? So I think that's effective, and that's part of why Buddhism has been very successful at not just inducing people, and you might say it's a watered down version of it. We'll get into that, but that people generally don't churn out of Buddhism the way that they have been churning out of Islam. The attrition rate of Islam is something like you lose 50% of converts after 3 years because I think the traditional morality is wrong. It's a bad interpretation of Islam, and that is imposed as normative. And the Western mind, which is actually more Islamic in some ways than the traditional Muslims, rejects the satanic teachings, and then because it's associated with Islam, that's my apologetic for that. I think we can do better. But with Buddhist practitioners in the West, because it's not putting so much baggage around people just find that even if they still smoke pot and date around and things like this, and they're not really going deep in the practices, they find it useful to continue to meditate
Well,
for years
the, the
and years.
the belief of past lives and karma makes it so we're not all in even plane. Like, for what I
Yeah,
understand
there's less pressure as well.
of you Muslims, you believe like we're all born the same, we all have to do the same thing, and we can all get the same results. But in Buddhism, with the framework of reincarnation, we're all in different stages. This is why there's so many traditions of Buddhism. Also, because the Buddha taught for 50 years and he had this magical ability to read people's karma and know exactly what would work for them. So, what's the path forward for an alcoholic that beats his wife is different than the path forward for a monk that is already like fasting, praying all day. They both have very different homework to do to get to the next step. So Buddhism offers this whole range of, we'll call it, remedies for your afflictions. So you have to learn what your affliction is, and that's formal meditation in a way is that process of reflection and witnessing your mind as it is, and seeing what's missing, what you have too much of, and then the Buddha offers like what can you do to move forward. For example, I've been taught practices that I felt were not a benefit at the time. So I focus, I'm a mom, I have very limited time. I focus my time on the practices that I do feel are making a difference in this moment.
Right, like you were given a module for like sort of level two meditation, and then you were not really able to get the fruits of it
Yeah.
because you didn't have the foundation yet.
Yeah, so I'm just doing like very basic stuff, trying to get my mental peace. Also, as a mom of a raging toddler, I really need peace.
Yeah.
And so you just focus, and this is why there's probably less turnover, because it's, you get to use what serves you, and also part of the core teachings that we don't judge each other. So there's not like you're a bad Muslim because you're a bad Buddhist because you drank a cup of wine. It's like, no,
But you know what I found? I did a little digging, and this is very modern. The the sectarian invective between Buddhists of different schools and debating some of these obscure angels on the head of a pin type questions in the Middle Ages was quite intense, even though you would imagine it's very straightforward and it's overtly stated in the Quran, but it's like pretty clearly implied by Buddhism that you shouldn't be like emotionally invested in abstract debates. And yet it was a big thing. And the Lotus Sutra, the White Lotus Sutra, has similar to the Quran, like a super hell. It's like the word, like the hell of the hypocrites for those who are schismatics and those who are um, denigrating of the sutra.
Well, you shouldn't disrespect the teachings ever.
But my point is that there really are actually even more similarities. So there's bodhicitta, there's merit, there's hasana. Bodhicitta would be kind of um, like I don't know, shukr or maybe beyond shukr, like ishq, having this compassionate swelling in your soul to care for other life,
But it's more
other beings.
relative bodhicitta. This is the thing about Buddhism. They give you relative terms because the absolute terms you will understand when you're enlightened. You can't even the mind that does math and does grocery shopping cannot understand the Buddhist philosophy. So they give you regular terms for when your little monkey mind to understand maybe a little bit. And the relative bodhicitta is to love every living thing, including mosquitoes, worms, cockroaches, as a mother loves her only son. That's the level of love. So it's a lot more extreme. As a mother who has an only son should attest to it. And then the absolute bodhicitta is something that you can only understand once you're enlightened.
Right on. Some other terms, so like merit and hasanat, this idea that divisive speech is bad, that you should try to purify your thoughts,
What's the eightfold
that
path?
you're being graded on everything you do, and that your good deeds are counting for you. This level of granularity is a big, and this is not mystical tradition. This is explicitly built into the Quran, right? You get a tenfold multiplier on your good deeds. There's a hadith that says maybe it's even more, maybe it's 700-fold. You don't know. So it opens your. Ooh, it's very tantalizing in that way. Um, One neat thing though is there's this affiliate marketing reflink system in Buddhism where you can share your merit,
I share merit. I share my merit every day.
and that's you can make dua for people, and the angels will write it as a good deed if you make dua for other people instead of just making dua for yourself. So there is something of that in Islam. Um, okay, so then you have different schools and different systems of akida or creed. So like Mahayana and Theravada are fairly different. According to Giorgiani, Mahayana is influenced by Zoroastrianism. And then the Tibetan school of Avalokiteshvara that you're in.
I'm not in the school. Avalokiteshvara. It's just one of the. It's just a Buddha, but I'm not in the school of Avalokiteshvara. I've just received the initiation onto the Avalokiteshvara
Right, but you
sadhana.
study under a sheikh or a kempo,
I have
right?
I have a teacher.
And he is of a sisala or a tradition chain that goes back through Tibet. It goes to the Dalai Lama and it goes back
Yeah,
to Avalokiteshvara.
yeah. He studied with Avalokiteshvara was one of the Buddha's um, students.
And he's considered the Buddha of compassion.
Yes.
And this emphasizes the Bodhisattva specific tradition, which is an interesting cusp because it's a Theravada school, but it has in common some things with Mahayana. And the emphasis not on negating everything and blinking out of existence eventually, but on becoming a bodhisattva and being of use to other unenlightened people is the focus.
Well, yeah. Our focus is that we're all in this together. It's just we all win or we all lose. This is why I share the merit. The other day, the neighbor's dog died, and I did this prayer so I can share my merit that I've accumulated in this life with him, so he will reincarnate in a nice place. It's an exercise in humbleness.
There is an expanded universe idea in Islam that animals who are bad, like our cat, who is a bird torturer, will be annihilated on Judgment Day. So God doesn't just judge humans; God judges everything. But only humans like have this weight of immortality in their punishment. So the animals that are punished are just
We
annihilated.
just assume our cat is.
Yeah,
He didn't deserve
he's,
that.
he's going. Yeah, he's not going to heaven. It's just you can't torture.
I love it.
Maybe
I love
killing
it.
in some ways, in some contexts, but not torturing.
Yeah.
But maybe that was his cat nature. But not every cat does that. So um, anyway, so that was just a note. So there's this Pure Lands Buddhism, which is kind of like Jhana, as opposed to the Deva realms of Hinduism being a trap. The pure realms are like a legitimate, like the Quran says, you'll never desire anywhere else. So this dilemma that some people have of like, am I going to go crazy being immortal in heaven because I'm going to get bored eventually? It's just like no, just don't worry about it, right? So the Pure Lands resolves this by saying, well, you're only going to be in the Pure Lands for like a few 100,000 years or whatever, right?
Well, my teacher explains that karma is fuel. It burns out eventually. So when you go to the nicer places of samsara, you just go until you burn. Like Mother Teresa, for example, she would go to this. If she's not enlightened, but she was very good, she would go to a much nicer place than this until she burns off all her good credit, and then it depends on whether she builds more credit or
No, but the Pure Lands was outside of Samsara. It's a way station before you finally achieve nirvana. So like the idea, this is more like Southeast Asian Mahayana Buddhism, where like wealthy people who are really subsidizing the sangha, they're building monasteries and so on. They're told that like, oh no, you're gonna like get to like go have 72 uh, virgins to meditate with. I guess it's a little more. It's not as carnal as the huris of jhana, but they're told you're gonna get like this tangible reward that's exempt from this dilemma. So this is not in Tibetan Buddhism, the Pure Lands.
It doesn't make sense to me according to the teachings that I've received.
Yeah,
that there's a place exempt from karma. That doesn't really, the math doesn't match to me.
right. My friend who wrote a screenplay about the Southeast Asian Buddhists in a sci-fi thriller context as a backdrop. I guess he's studying that sort of Cambodian Mahayana. He also thought it was kind of like a marketing brochure, like fundraising idea, and not like a legitimate idea.
A place without karma does not.
But I do think that the more than that cynical take, the Pure Lands Buddhist idea might have descended from Zoroastrianism, and it might be a mutation from this. It's not strictly Abrahamic because Zarathustra, Islam, was in a different prophetic lineage from Abraham, Islam. But basically, the Vedic religion of that we call Hinduism Vedic, but it's not really Vedic. It's very evolved away from that with the reincarnation and everything. The Vedic is like a very samey, like pantheons, animal sacrifice, heaven and hell. So like the hell in Buddhism, which is obviously taking from Hindu, is taking from is actually the same root from the Indo-European migration and those early civilizations. Which if you believe in the Quran, you might interlace it as being from Adamic prophetic revelation or some other earlier prophetic revelation. But anyways, I do.
I don't know enough about this.
Yeah, that's okay. So what other? What are some other key terms? Maybe we can compare to some Arabic keywords. Are you gonna turn off the chickpeas?
Okay.
What were you gonna do?
I have to get some notes.
Okay.
So I will be able.
So patience is a sabr is a very it's almost a paramount importance
Yeah,
among virtues in Islam.
The most important thing. So the Eightfold Path is right view, right speech, and then that no divisive speech, no irony, no crudeness.
Yeah, that was something about that's also in Islam, the prohibition of irony. Don't lie even to be funny.
Exactly.
Like people do this on Twitter all the time, and you're supposed to assume that they're being ironic.
No, but have you been around somebody who's very ironic and sardonic, and it's funny in the beginning, and then at the end your soul just feels drained?
Yeah, because it's this postmodern dissimulation of all signifiers into meaningless. Everything's in scare quotes.
Yeah, there's right resolve, which is what do you want? Do you want like the yacht and the bitches, or you want to
Okay,
get
so like in Islam, like Akida is important. It gets over elaborated. There's a minimal Akida of like belief in God on the last day, or maybe a few other things. The angels, the books, the messengers. Nobody actually believes in all the books. They say they do. We're all the messengers. They say they do, but then they're like, "But what are the books?" That's another conversation. Obviously, belief in angels is rather easy. So yeah, sure, there are angels. But anyway, intent. What you were saying is the third one was
right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct.
right resolve. Yeah. So in Islam, intent is like essential and is maybe even more important than results. So this is a commonality. Okay. So what's the fourth one?
Right conduct.
Okay, that's yeah. Do good deeds. Yeah, sure.
Right livelihood.
Right. Don't have haram income from riba or fraud or
For us, is
oppressing people.
we can't deal in beans because
Wait, you guys take it for you can't deal in beans?
beans.
Oh,
Like
beans.
back then, there was a lot of
But
slavery.
beans are okay. Beans are like
Beans
one
are
thing you
okay.
can. That's like a staple trade. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, for in this, you can't trade slaves or sell fish.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Now in Islam you can trade slaves, but you can't take slaves. But they took slaves anyway. That was a big abused loophole.
There's right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. Mindfulness is what I was describing to you, but the idea of the focus of your meditation, then you make it the present
Wait,
moment.
wait, wait, wait. We went too fast. Okay, so we had the first four.
View, resolve, speech, conduct, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and samadhi.
Okay, so effort is like jihad, basically, at all levels, and struggle,
Yeah.
rather than strictly like we're going to go to war. That's not so Buddhist. That's a delimiter. Okay, and then the last two are mindfulness or like khushu, being humble in your salah is a common
No,
thing.
just no.
Remembering God, being a person of remembrance.
Right, just being in the present at all times. Don't live in.
And then the last one is samadhi. So that needs to be unpacked a little bit.
Because people like samadhi.
So this is maybe where we get into the Sufi and Irfani Shia tradition. So in Sufism, you have Fanafi Sheikh or Fanafi Rasul, Fanafi Allah, and the Fana is like the ego death. And this is a sort of enlightenment. And in Ibn Arabi's interpretation of heaven and hell, well, mostly just hell, is that, yeah, they're in hell, but they learn to like it. And basically, like the way I've interpreted this is they they come to be grateful for how it's like crazy that God exists and is like you're in this like fire, like God's energy is like blasting you all the time. So you come to appreciate that, and so it ceases to be suffering. So this is like a Buddhist idea that you detach from like, oh, how could God like be burning me all the time? And it's like there is no you anymore. You achieve the fana that way, and then likewise in heaven, you don't really have this problem of becoming bored with like a bunch of parties and things because you attain a similar beatific vision. So it's just like a much more pleasant path to the same ultimate fana. And this is a universalist, annihilationist, and eternal either reward, bliss, or torment. It's all synthesized into one divine reality. That's how I've come to extrapolate Ibn Arabi.
Well, that's one thing that my teacher always says. Like, reality is always perfect.
Sure.
So you're screaming because the water here didn't go off and you have to take a cold shower at 6 a.m. But reality is always perfect. I mean, you're meant to have a cold shower today. You know?
Sure.
That's
So,
kind of the
like
point.
in Islam, it's like, well, if you're a believer and you're suffering, then that's good because God is like giving you tests and favoring you for the long run. And like the people in Gaza are sort of in hell on earth, but they're gonna like have a much easier time on Judgment Day. It sort of fits in with that.
And then the right conduct, we can switch to the.
No, but we got to unpack samadhi some more because I talked about the Sufi idea a little
Okay,
bit.
samadhi is the right is meditation.
Okay.
It's the ability, what I was discussing before, the ability to choose what you focus on, and what by focusing on one meditative object for long enough, you can reach the non-dual state you can be. And mindfulness is to be in the moment without the the head narrator.
Yeah.
You know, because we all have this narrator that's like, this coffee's good, this coffee's bad, traffic's good, traffic's bad. You know, and this is this things like beautiful woman, ugly woman. You know,
Yeah.
to get rid of that voice.
That's an interesting thought. But in this game I was playing, Slay the Princess, the narrator is a sort of duotagonist who's it's like the dialect of how the narrator's framing your choices is a big part of the game. And then getting rid of the narrator is a part of it. So I've been thinking about doing a small story world to dip my feet back into video game making, called Theophany, where instead of encountering this princess in different forms based on your disposition or before, it's about different theologies, and instead of it being God as like a with an illustration, which is too blasphemous in Islam, anti-iconism. thinking about doing like different angels, different forms of angels with some kind of calligraphy for a head instead. And then exploring the different akitas. And so what you just said is interesting because I was thinking like I'm thinking now like you have a narrator like in Slay the Princess, and then you fana away the narrator as you go through these theophatic encounters. So that'll I'm gonna bookmark that. Okay, so it's a little different than fana, but it has a lot in common. Whereas your mindfulness, your hushu, this is more of your baseline practice. Okay.
And then there's where we have a lot of overlap in the Patrimoshka, right? Conduct, which is the 5 precepts of not killing, not stealing, not sexual excesses, not engaging in false speech, and not indulging in intoxicants.
Yeah, so it's almost like the Noahide laws, minus the intoxicants.
I dreamt that I smoked a joint last night. Somebody gave me a joint, and I was like,
Nate,
"Am I
nate.
gonna do this? Am I gonna do this?" And I smoked.
Toba, toba,
I was like, I'm
toba.
gonna smoke just a little bit, and then I was like, no.
I had a dream that I was given whiskey, and then I remember. I often remember. Oh wait, this is I'm a Muslim now. This is haram.
Yeah, that's what my dream. I was like, no, I'm a Buddhist, like the Patrimoshka. And then
Yeah.
not killing includes not eating meat,
Yeah.
which is difference. And then there's the paramitas.
Right. So that's one big difference is that you can eat, kurbani meat.
We can't kill anything. Yesterday, a mosquito was buzzing by my ear, and I was like, I want to kill you, but I'm not going to do it.
You're not supposed to kill insects either. There's a story of Imam Ali like stepping on an ant and then weeping for it, and then he's informed, no, it's okay. The ant forgives you and is interceding for you.
No, last night I heard the mosquito buzzing in my ear, and I was like praying in my head, being like, mosquito, I'm tapping into Buddha nature. Please don't bite me, because then I'm gonna have to kill you. And it did not hit me.
Yeah, so that's one difference is that we're allowed to make exceptions for like cockroaches and mosquitoes, things that are a threat to our, home.
Like that
basically.
spider yesterday.
Well, I let the spider out.
I know, that was the size of a coin.
It's a big spider. I hope he's.
It was like a euro coin.
I hope he's doing well, or she.
And then there's the paramitas, which is what the things that we're supposed to build: generosity, ethical conduct, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom.
Yeah.
And they say that the first 5 are blind.
Wait. So let's run through it again.
Generosity.
Altruism. So sadhaka is very important. It's a pillar.
Ethical conduct.
Wait. So generosity. What's the second one?
Ethical conduct.
Sure. Okay.
Patience.
Sabar. Yeah.
Diligence.
Okay. Yeah. Do your work well. Yeah.
Meditation.
Okay.
Wisdom.
That's 6.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. The first 5 are blind. The wisdom is what carries them.
Yeah. So the hikmah, the book in the hikmah. Yeah, sure. Okay. So
and that's kind of TLDR.
So like I would say that like forms of Islam that are like Mutazili-esque, like Shiism without some of the weird stuff, or Quranism without taking a Hawariji interpretation, or like chill Sufi Sunnism, like chill Maliki, even without the Sufi. These are like 70 to 80% similar to Christianity, without obviously some of the theology and the jihad emphasis. Although it's not like Christians that didn't dip into it. A lot of Christians in the U.S. believe in like Second Amendment. They're not all pacifists, right? But that with Buddhism, it's even more of an overlap. It's more like 80 to 90%. There's just like the attention to detail is greater, and this is where it would depart from Christianity in that 10%.
Oh, yeah, you guys can't sin on your head.
Well, I guess there's a hadith that if you think about doing something bad and then you don't do it, you get rewarded for that. And that if you think about doing something good and you don't do it, you get like half the reward or something, which is a hadith that we probably wouldn't find credible. So it sounds a little bit too good to be true. So there's different interpretations about what your inner life is like.
You guys believe that killing is okay sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you got to execute, criminal murderers. No, it's the Sharia. Um, and so you under divine command. And if they haven't murdered or killed, but they've been like sort of like the armed criminals in Heat, even if they didn't execute the cop, they would still be subject to the death penalty. And I guess like rapists, we would probably make under the spreading corruption in the land. So like, there's been pushback about the grooming gangs. Like Elon Musk dug that story up, and the Muslims are like, yeah, like we all agree, like these guys should be executed, which is harsher than what you guys do. You're just gonna put them through the system for like 5 years and put them back out on the street. We'll get rid of them forever, but they're not allowed to do that because it's against the law of the land. And vigilantism is generally, unless you're like Huaraji, it's generally extremely discouraged.
You guys believe gender roles are divine?
Yeah, well, I've deconstructed that a fair bit, but like it's not to say that God doesn't create. It's one of these things where like the Quran doesn't say like there's no such thing as intersex people or things like that, right? So there was like Imane Khalifa, or there was a woman who competed in the Olympics who is intersex. So she has higher testosterone levels than other women, and she's a boxer or she's like MMA or something.
That's God made.
So she was
didn't buy anything.
exactly. So this was the yeah. There was like pushback, and then it was pushback against pushback. So anyway, so yeah, that's a whole kettle of fish.
Yeah. So that's one of the things like because I that pushes me out of Abrahamics is that I don't believe in gender roles
Yeah, it was that and the jihad thing.
and the violence.
Yeah, that's what
Like
deflected you.
I am a feminist, and ahimsa is the most important spiritual teaching according to me. So I can be a part of ahimsa is non-violence.
So that would be the 10% that Islam doesn't have with Christianity that Buddhism has with Christianity. Is more radical pacifism.
Yes, the most radical pacifism.
Although with Christianity, it's more there's more flexibility on it, but it is more overt.
There's these stories of these Buddhists that got killed by the communists, and they would thank the soldier.
Right. Well, that's like Al Halaj.
Or the Dalai Lama interviewed this monk that got tortured, and he was saying, and he was talking to the Dalai Lama, and he was like, and almost the worst thing happened to me. And the Dalai Lama was like, what, you got killed? He's like, no, I almost lost my body cheetah.
Right.
In the torture. Because that is the worst thing that can happen to you.
Well, there's a hadith like that where I think it was either Ali or Muhammad who they were gonna like execute this Qurayshi guy in the battle, and then the guy is like, "Ah, oh, you so and so," he insults him. So then he's like, and he stops, and he's like, "Wait, you're not gonna kill me now?" And he's like, "I was going to kill you for God, but now I'm angry, and I want to kill you because I'm angry at you. I can't do that." And then the guy was like, "Whoa, that's really base. I want to become a Muslim now. That's like really impressive." So that kind of shows you the cusp of this.
Right.
That it's like they're in a context where they're in a total war for survival situation between city states, and that like foreign powers were aiding on the side of their opponent. And then maybe they had some support from these underground orders of Persian Knights, but through Salman. But anyways, it was a situation where to be totally pacifist, they would have been annihilated and the mission would have failed. And then you might say, well, hey, like it would, Christ got, martyred. Whether people debate about whether he actually was crucified, whatever. I don't, I don't split the details too much. The point is, he submitted to martyrdom, and this is what was historically recorded and what it was impressed upon everybody in the movement. And then through that martyrdom, they were like, "Oh, but there's this greater spiritual victory, right?"
Yes.
Now, would this have happened if the people of Medina were all like wiped out and their women enslaved and so on by the Meccans? I don't know. The thing is, they tried that this has been tried with Christianity. And what ultimately happened is that the empire who martyred the guy co-opted from a Muslim and Ebionite point of view, and maybe a Jewish point of view, Messianic Jewish, let's say, co-opted the theology into an Attis Dionysius Greco-Roman, mystery religion. Like they're even doing Mithraism rituals in the Catholic Church today with the cup and the dress and so on.
The incense.
And the Christmas tree lights is like the Amanita mushroom ritual and so on.
Well, Christmas tree is the you.
Well, the incense goes into the Tanakh actually. That's
That's
Temple Judaism. So that's
like your solstice.
yeah. So basically it did do what the so and this is the debate about the Messiah and like does Islam kind of like underwhelm the Messiah thing. But in Isaiah, like a big part of the Messiah's job description is to galvanize Judaic monotheism to be known throughout the world, that every nation would know of the knowledge of the God of Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob would be, Islams would be replete throughout the nations. This was accomplished anyway, but you end up with um, deifying humans and this kind of demigod like divine conception incarnative thing, which the Quran is pushing back against, right? So it's kind of like at that point, and likewise, if there were no pushbacks among the Jews or the Israelites rather, to purify the monotheism in that place, then they wouldn't have this prototype nation. So that justifies some of the crazy stuff in the Old Testament, and some of it is too crazy, and it's like been disproven by archaeology. And this would be like your corruption of the text, your tribal triumphalism getting in there. Um, but anyways, so that's a whole debate. But I would say that it would not have. I mean, maybe it would have. Like, it's too counterfactual, but I would say probably not. It probably would not have moved everybody to be like more radically monotheist than like Christianity was if Medina had been razed to the ground or brutalized. Of course, it was sacked by Yazid about 100 years later, um, but it wasn't it wasn't razed to the ground. Um, so that's the funny part of it is that they forget. So this Christians that debate me say, oh, but that's not forgive. Islam isn't forgiving. And so, well, funny story is that the Prophet forgave the Meccans, let them fake convert to Islam, and then they started doing conspiracies to take over. And the son of the guy that he had who forgave, the son of Muawiyah, uh, ended up conquering Medina later on just to punish them for supporting Hussein, his his grandson, who was killed, and so on. It's just like it's brutal. So maybe they should have been less forgiving. Is my takeaway from it. I'm not saying they should have necessarily executed Muawiyah, but
But this is all very worldly, and you believe that if you're not rewarded in the world for your
no,
pious actions, like if you,
it's just more about historical results.
yeah, but this is still very worldly, right? Like Gandhi said, he was gonna get the English Empire through ahimsa, and if they had to fight physically, then they'd rather die.
Right, but like we've already had Christ do that. We've already had do take this kind of Buddhist. Let's say that's a Buddhist idea.
No, ahimsa's older than the Buddha.
Sure, but like let's say it's an idea that's titrated through Buddhism that is not super emphasized in Judaism. Um, in the Tanakh, there's some touches of it. There's some poetic. It's not every story is a story of like Samson directly triumphing, but um, that generally Christians take a different. They abrogate the Tanakh with this more pacifist note, even though the history of Christian empires and crusades and so on isn't like that. In fact, when it became an imperial enterprise, it very much became like now we're going to persecute people who don't believe in our latest ecumenical council's conclusions, right? So whatever, I mean, that's part of what turned me off to it. But is not very consistent, right? It's only in modernity with these like neo Protestant restorationists that they can sort of say that, and it's on the back of like all these centuries of all these movements and like First Amendment rights and so on. But anyway, big kettle of fish there. But no, I just think that like all of that had already been said, and that's a part of the canon of like divine revelatory aspects, and it should be taken into account. And you can also see some of that out of the hadiths and in the way the Quran, like the Quran, does not encourage or even permit like aggressive jihad, like they ended up doing in the Rashidun and Umayyad caliphates, where they just went and conquered in the name of Islam. That was wrong. It permits defensive jihad, and if they want to make peace with you, then you should make peace with them. You shouldn't just have a vendetta until the last man, woman, and child. Okay, that's not right. But the point is the radical pacifism of just like saying, well, okay, like we're gonna like just see we're just gonna lie down and see what happens. Like this has been tried, and here's a different tack, which is a more moderate,
Yeah, but in the world, you
intermediate.
only see like 30% of the consequences in the
Well,
Matrix.
look, obviously the Muslims having this take on jihad and fighting, and like even look at like Gaza, right? Like
Yeah, you guys are still suffering. When I read the Quran, I didn't finish it. I was like, oh, there's a big door for bad karma here.
yeah,
It's wide open,
and it's very obviously played out badly in many
and you can see
both
how
sectarian and bad relations with non-Muslims.
right, like you guys are still suffering from the bad karma that this creates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. It's a big challenge how to interpret jihad wisely.
It's just, for example, like we have a feisty toddler. If we spanked him, maybe he would behave better. But what would the other consequences be?
Sure,
This short term versus long
he can
term.
beat his wife. Well, it's a cycle of violence that goes on for centuries. Yeah, I understand that. Well, anyway, this is why I'm not Kron only. Actually, I mean, to be fair, so I kind of meet you. I don't know about halfway, but I meet you partway on that. But I sometimes think it's unfortunate that well, so I made dua. You told me that going back to the beginning of this conversation, you told me that you were like 20% Christian, 40% Hindu, and 40% into Wicca. That was when I was like converting, and you were still like hanging out with the green mushroom people. And then I was like, okay, that's not going to work for me. That's like according to the Sharia, like even taking a more open tack on it. Like that's too much mushrika stuff for me. And then you got like really hurt by that. It's like I'm not good enough for you, and I'm like, look, I just converted to this religion. Maybe it was reactionary impetus to begin doing so, but now I'm like doing it for real, and I'm not allowed to be married to an associator. So that blend is not going to work for me. So I made dua for you. We're having some issues, that have gotten better in our relationship. And on Laytul Qadr, we had some words over something very small, but I was like my feelings really hurt, and I was like crying, but I was like pushing myself, and I didn't like ruin the night by getting reactionary towards you, and you went to bed. So then I made this dua um, to first off that God wouldn't like burn people in hell forever. So then I had this vision of intercession on Judgment Day and among the Alawiyah helping people out, and I was like very moved by that, and I kind of wept, and I made dua for you that God would do for you what He did for me, and I didn't specify how. Like I didn't say like make her like Muslim or whatever, right? So then you got into Sikh, then you got into this, right? So the Sikh was not tickling you so much in the depth of the nitnem wasn't doing it, and it was too time
Well,
consuming.
I'm a researcher, so I think the only thing that can work for me is like something with a body of work as extends Buddhism,
Right.
and with a scientific process.
And Buddhism is modular, Christianity, yogi, and Islam,
It
obviously.
builds a lot. Well, the Tibetan Buddhism, the Buddha built a lot on what the yogis had already worked on, which is the first tradition that I studied. So it's easy for me to go from yoga to Buddhism. Like
Yeah.
I can't like I did not grow up Abrahamic. I think it requires some sort of these like the structures on the brain get formed. Yeah.
Well, I often think that about very specific Islam strains,
Well, yeah,
like Twelver Shiism or certain types of Sunnism. I think the only way I can see that working is if it's like you inherit it
I mean,
through your parents.
your dad's it's a Catholic ascetic,
Yeah,
and that shapes your view of Islam tremendously.
sure. Because I'm attracted to a sort of Matazili thought as sort of like Catholic Thomism without the Trinity, and then the Sufi asceticism. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's no way around
So
it.
I'm sort of becoming my father with the twist. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, mashallah.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. He saved tons of people.
May Allah have mercy on him for his deviance.
But he saved lives of poor people.
Yeah, I'd like to think that he's already been punished for being a Trinitarian, and he's not going to go to hell for,
No,
because he has so much hasana.
no, and he did a great job with you and your siblings.
Yeah.
He's a good man.
Well, and the part of the reason why I go debate with Christians and try to work on this dawa package is to potentially dawa him to being like a Unitarian, heretical Catholic, and still doing the traditions, but like seeing the Eucharist a little differently.
No, you're not gonna get the Irish Catholic to stop loving Mary.
No, but like I think that's okay. Like I'm not like, oh, Tawassul Istigatha is so bad. It's just about how you frame it. I think making the Qibla out of a Mary statue is an overt violation of the second commandment. Like they did that in Mass. That was like one of the last times I went to Mass. I was like, wait, this is actually worse than I was hoping it was. Like they really are. Like you don't notice it until you pay attention to these commandments, and then you go, oh, wait a minute. This is pretty weird. This is kind of idolatrous, guys. But anyway, the Protestants have been on that beat for a while. But no, I don't think Mary. I mean, they definitely go too far with the Mariology. I don't think it's necessarily bad to venerate Mary alayhi salam. For instance, I'm just sending salams on her, right? That's a form of veneration. That's Islamic. But anyways, as for you, if these exclusivists are right, then you're not like living by the Quran or the Sunnah, and you're not like dismissing the Quran as being part of this sort of perennial bouquet of wisdom literature, but you didn't like click the terms of service.
No, it goes against, like, some things go against what I believe, but in our teacher tells us that philosophies and religions are not on a horizontal plane; they're on a vertical plane, depending on what you need and where you are. So it's like,
Well, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying, because I'm saying there are these different tones in the message from the different rasulis, and
like Islam was the medicine you needed. You have
yeah,
you are having improved tremendously as a human.
it's a strong coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And it's not the medicine that I need.
right. But you don't disrespect it.
No. Like
So that's
the
something.
same way I don't inject myself with insulin, but I wouldn't like shame people who do because they need it.
So I'm optimistic. Well, last week I was dissecting this about Vedantists, but I was saying Vedantists are basically Buddhism influenced Hindus. Maybe they have a dualist Atman frame, which may be Quranic because of the root, but whatever. That's another question that I delved into. But I think that the Buddha may be like Dul Hifl, who's mentioned in the Quran, and that Buddhists could be people of the book. Not the Bible book, but the White Lotus Sutra, I guess, because yeah, I mean, there's a whole body of literature, but they could be basically non-Quranic monotheists, less so than Sikhs, where the guy was influenced by reading the Quran.
Well, the Buddhist favorite, if you want to read one book, somebody's listening to this, is The Path of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. That's the book.
Yeah, maybe I'll get around to reading it. I think the next thing, since my channel is Zen Islam, is I'm gonna listen to Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and then
Thich Nhat Hanh. He's the Zen guy. Do you wanna read?
But who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind? Well, I'm gonna start with that, and then I'll get into
A
the.
beginner's mind is extremely important. You would benefit so much from it. That's a big
Yeah,
Buddhist idea.
I've got too much of an intermediator's mind.
Yeah. No, this is a beginner's mind. It's
Like, I'm not a beginner. I'm at least an intermediate. It's like, no, you're actually that's a beginner mistake.
yeah.
The intermediate move is to assume you're a beginner.
No, you're an intellectual. I'm an intellectual. This is kind of what
We
draws us
like to
together.
think that we have more points.
This is why the beginner's mind is extra important to us.
Yeah.
We're behind on humbleness.
Well, I think that some Buddhists will go to hell because of their Akita, and that it's like the best thing that they could have asked for, because what better way for them to become enlightened? And I don't think it would be an intense level of hell. I think it would be just what they need to achieve the fana, and that's an accelerated enlightenment for them. And then I think a lot of Buddhists could go to heaven. I think Al Araf, this middle place, this kind of refugee camp, waiting room, is a great place for a lot of Buddhists to go, because they can go and they can help people who are there to get into heaven faster by working through their arrogance and their egoism.
Yeah, I don't believe in heaven.
No, I know you don't, but that's that's a part of your rejection of the Rasala. So the paradox is there are people who say that if you believe in universalism, like I saw a Catholic priest talking about this, then you are automatically going. It's a mortal sin, So it's sort of like it's like salvation aids. It's like if you believe that the scope of salvation is too big, you lose your salvation. So it becomes this like it's kind of a bit silly, right? And there's this thing in the Sunni tradition that if you believe what the Quran says about salvation being in a limited scope but relatively wide compared to what they teach, which is you have to like you can't even be in the wrong sect of Islam, right? That you're out of Islam and you lose your salvation that way. So obviously, I don't believe in that. I think that's too far, but I do believe the Quran, and so I just I hope that that Allah will have mercy on you on Judgment Day and recognize your many good deeds. The same with my father, and that you're not so much on the shirk. So that's probably maybe you're in a better position than a Catholic. I don't know.
I have not saved lives like your dad has.
That's true. No, he has more good deeds. That's true.
Your dad has more good deeds than all of us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, that's only God can really. It takes so much wisdom to be able to judge at these levels of nuance. So this is why only God can do it.
And the place where your dad started, he's moved lives. Like you and I were brought up in good environments and good families, so it's harder to push forward so much.
So you reject hell so much that you don't even believe in hell in the Buddhist teaching, which does teach hell,
No, I don't.
as like eventually negative karma could like reincarnate you into hell.
There's plenty of people that are in hell, in Earth right now.
Yeah, no, I know. So well, and that's how they teach it is like don't get freaked out by this. If your mind can make you suffer because you latch onto something, then you just extrapolate that, and that would be hell.
I think we're all living in our own mandalas, our own creation. We can create header. Like our brains are a VR set. You know, we create our own perception. We create our own suffering.
Yeah. So okay. Anyway, enough about hell. Let's end on a nice note, and then we got work to do today. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
what would you like to end on? What would you like to talk about?
I would just like to see because obviously like this your channel is for Muslims, so I think you would find tremendous benefit if you trained your mind into one focus point for several minutes at a time.
Well, that's what we try to do in Salah.
Yeah, but I think it's not the focus of Salah. I'm just saying like it will.
I don't. I think you're wrong about that.
Okay.
I think that's a conversation that we keep having, where there's a little bit of tradition chauvinism on both of our parts. that you're underestimating Salah, and I'm underestimating, Buddhism vis-a-vis theistic affirmation. But
But whether you do or you don't, like it's still like training your mind to be focused on a single thing for a long time would reap a lot of benefit.
well, I suppose one thing would be, and this is I haven't
And
really
quit social media.
I haven't made the time. I have been cutting back on social media. I haven't made the time to do intensive meditation because Salah takes and I've just been working so much. And I'm on the tariqa familiar of just losing your ego by having to serve your family, right?
Oh no, having a child is the true ego death.
Yeah, but I would like to later on in life, inshallah, when I have more stability in my time, do like Sufi meditation and deepen my spiritual practice with more zikr and like 30-minute meditation sessions. Beyond just, but yeah, with Salah, I'm still struggling to master the hushu or even get a pretty good hushu that's consistent.
It's a little discouraging how long it takes to get improvement in this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, you've been doing this for like a year now, and you're still struggling also.
Yeah. No, but like Kempo says, even the llamas struggle. It takes a lot.
Yeah.
I just hope that like in my next reincarnation, I will sit down to meditate and be like, wow, this is so easy.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you'll be a Sufi Muslim.
If I keep meditating from now until I'm 80, in my next life, I will find it a little bit easier.
There's some interpretations that Khalid had, where the angels are like, "Did you not live a long enough life?" That some people get like a do over. That like, so there might be reincarnation, but it's not like you reincarnate like millions of times throughout the aeons. It's just like you get like one or two do overs, just to like serve the justice. So you can have reincarnation and then Judgment Day later anyway.
And here we say there's a Buddhist saying that like we've all reincarnated so many times that everybody's been everyone's mom.
Yeah.
This is why you need to love everyone.
Yeah. Well, I love you very much. Probably more than other people, to be fair.
Well, we married for a while.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I do believe that in the qadr of Allah, that Allah placed us together so that, how many couples are like Muslim and Buddhist?
I wonder this. People ask me like, wow, that's a strong match.
It's an interesting. Well, the note comparisons are, I think, something novel and useful. That's what we're publishing on the internet today, inshallah, mashallah, inshallah. Just the will of God in a non-temporal context.
Yeah, I just have to reap some benefits somehow. This time that we're taking.
Yeah.
Now I gotta keep working.
Alrighty. Alaikum salam, Caddy. Oh, I should have. Oh, we'll cut it out. I gotta edit.